Yeah, welcome. Happy Wednesday. Good afternoon.
Yeah, welcome.
Oops, yeah.
Happy.
So we can hear me. I could hear myself. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are from. I am Florent. I work in the DevRel team. And as for the last weeks, I'm going to continue working on an application, and the backend is built with Spring Data Neo4j 6, which is the newest major version of Spring Data Neo4j. But of course, I will also need a front end, and that part I will do with Angular, and that will be most of my focus today. So of course, I will show a recap of the backend, so don't just run away yet. But yes, it will be more front-end heavy, more during this session. So welcome everyone. Please tell me where you're from. Here in Paris, so it is 5 p.m. The weather is about 20 degrees Celsius, which is roughly corresponds to 70 Fahrenheit degrees. So it's quite sunny, it's quite enjoyable, so it almost feels like spring, no pun intended. And yeah, I hope you can enjoy some nice weather as well. And I even heard that, the sunnier it is, the harder it is for this damn coronavirus. So that's just positive things all over. And before I dive into the live coding parts, I wanted to make a few announcements. And let me share my screen. As you may know, I mentioned it last week, Nodes 2021 is about to happen on June, and the call for paper is open. So of course, please register. We would love to see you. We would love to see you attend, ask questions, interact with speakers and organizers. But also, if you want to submit a talk or presentation about your experience with Neo4j, we would love to hear from you. And of course, I missed the URL. So you still have some time to think about a proposal, but we would love really to review your proposals. And if it works out, accept them and see you speak at Notes 2021. So there are various topics you can cover. So please please submit. We would love to see you talk there, and we will attend for sure. So yeah, Notes 2021 happening in June, and the call for papers and early April. So you have roughly a month to still think about the proposal you want to submit, or the proposals, the more the merrier. But of course, as it goes with the call for papers, the earlier you submit, the more chance you have to be fairly reviewed, because organizers and CFP call for paper reviewers tend to be overwhelmed with last-minute submissions, and of course that usually does not translate well in terms of reviewing quality, if I may say so. Of course, the reviewers here are awesome. That's not going to be any issue, but it's usually just a rule of thumb, a general rule of thumb, this call for papers in general, the earlier you submit, the better. So please, 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 do not be shy. Share your experience with Neo4j, and we'll be happy to review that. So, thanks for joining again. Please feel free to let me know how it's going for you in the comments, if there are any setup issues, video quality, sound, etc., and I will try to fix it. And of course, as usual, feel free to ask questions during the session, and then I will show that. So let's have a quick recap of what I'm trying to do. So with this Neo4j browser, and I'm about to show something I've been maintaining by hand. And to be honest, it started as a spreadsheet, and it's still mostly a spreadsheet. This graph is actually a work in progress, so it's not as complete as a spreadsheet. And as part of my DevRel work, I'm doing community outreach, and by community, I mean community of driver authors, because as you may know, we have drivers in the Neo4j world officially for 5 languages, so .NET, JavaScript, Java, Golang, and Python. But there are other drivers out there in other languages, PHP, Ruby, R, you name it. And there also are projects built on top of these drivers. And those are the things I'm quite interested in, reaching out to those maintainers and see how they're doing, how we can help, how we can, understand also what we can do better in terms of documentation, announcements, etc., etc. And so part of that work has led me to create a spreadsheet with, interesting projects, what language they are written in, whether they are well maintained or not, have some contact information maybe as well. And I was thinking, I'm working at Neo4j, so it would be nice to use a graph for that. So I started automating a little bit spreadsheet download and create it into a graph. But then, I was trying to look for ideas for a live stream series about Spring Data Neo4j6. And I thought, hey, you know what? Let's try to create a full application that will allow me to administrate. So at first to at least register new projects I see in the wild with some, some nice graphical user interface, and those that would end up in some graph database somewhere, probably in Aura, which is, the cloud offering of Neo4j, and there is Aura free on waiting list, by the way, if you want to check it out. And of course we have, so yeah, let me open a browser just so you can check real quick. Neo4j Aura, in case you don't know, fully managed by Neo4j, so you don't have to worry about the operational side of things. We have Aura Enterprise, we have Aura Free. You can join the waitlist, and then at some point you will get access to an instance of Neo4j fully managed by Neo4j. So that's probably what I'm going to do. And of course, you have the ancestor of Aura, so to say, which is called Sandbox, which has been recently updated. You can also check that if you want to. I will need to log in with my account in that case, but you can create an account real quick and then start an instance with no data or some data, even if you just want to play around. So those are some online options, and of course you can go with your own deployment if you like. So that's probably how it's going to look like towards the end. I will have a Neo4j instance in Aura or Sandbox, probably Aura. And the application I'm writing, which I'm going to show in a minute, is going to basically allow me to register drivers, just through a simple form. Drivers, and hopefully later some higher level projects, such as integrations with specific frameworks, like in the PHP world, there is Laravel, there is Symfony, etc., etc. And in Ruby, there is Rails, all these kind of integrations that are also interesting to monitor for me, and in order to reach out to their authors and see how we can help. So enough talking. Let me, for instance, show what kind of things I have manually input, before the application existed. So I have a few drivers here and there. And so in that case, okay, well, actually, I thought it was my bad. I picked the wrong instance. Those are just the tests I've been doing with the application. So let me switch. Oopsie. So it's not, that's the actual database I'm using locally with Neo4j Desktop. The other one is actually this one. So I'm going to wait, and I'm going to connect to the local version. This one is a remote version because I wanted to share it with my colleagues. So sorry about that. I picked the wrong instance, wrong local instance. And at some point, yes, thank you, it started. And let's look again at drivers, see what kind of information is there. And here you go, you have much more. So you have, for instance, the Neo4R. We have various projects, more maintained or not, in various languages. So if you look, for instance, I picked libneo4j client. This is one written in C, C++, but it supports only Bolt v1. Let's pick another one. Yeah, this Neo4j client you might know is written in C#.NET, just like the official one, by the way, and is maintained by. Actually, I don't think I have the maintainer information in there. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's kind of things I intend to see. Hey, Peter, I see you have I was about to say question, but more of a remark. I have left multiple messages on the website, but nothing back yet. After 3 months now, I have given up. So which website do you refer to? Because usually for questions, we have several options. So let me go through that because that's important information. We have community.neo4j.com. Which is discourse instance where you can ask your questions. We obviously have Slack, so the neo4j-users.slack.com. And then what we have for more, developer-oriented questions, we have Stack Overflow that many of us monitor daily and try to answer questions there. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, for instance, and let's continue the conversation by direct message. So FBILLE, that's me on Twitter. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me and let's continue the conversation there. And if you can point me to the online community website or the Slack questions that have gone unanswered, I will try to do my best to make sure it's not going unnoticed any longer. So thanks for chiming in. Hopefully we'll find a way to solve this. And again, for everyone, if you want to ask any questions, feel free. I will do my best. So let's, now that I have more or less given the domain in which we're operating, let's have a quick recap of the backend. So the backend we created the first API and completed it last week. And so we have a simple API here. So I'm using, Spring Data Neo4j as Spring MVC, a bit old school, I know, but and I need a repository. And with this repository, I will just, save the driver that comes from the HTTP request. Quite simple. So if I look now, the interesting part, of course, is the driver repository, which, as you might know, with Spring Data in general, and Spring Data Neo4j in particular, repositories are only interfaces most of the time. So you declare what you need, and Spring Data will figure out what kind of query it should generate, etc., etc. Of course, you still have the option when you have some complicated stuff that doesn't really work with the naming convention of methods to do custom queries like this, and then you can bind the method to a custom query. So in that case, because we're doing something very basic, which is just save a driver, I would just expose it here. But there are several ways to go about this. So yeah, that's basically it. The application is mostly that. And of course, there is the entities, so my domain. And my domain mostly revolves for now around what I call the Neo4j driver, which I mapped in the graph with a driver label, because I don't want Neo4j drivers. The only reason I prefixed it with Neo4j was to avoid naming clash with the actual Bolt driver that the Spring Data Neo4j uses. And so just an ID with a nice UUID generator built into Spring Data Neo4j that allows me to not rely on intrinsic IDs of node or relationships, because those are not stable and are not guaranteed to be stable. Instead, UUIDs are usually a good fit if you don't have a good business natural key. And we'll see that in a minute, because we have an entity that has actually a business natural key. So a driver, what is it? It's a URI, have we seen? So usually GitHub repository, GitLab repository, what have you, whether it's official or not. So whether it's the official driver for Java.NET, Python, Golang, and JavaScript, and what kind of things it supports. And so that entirely depends. And it's a list because, for instance, if you take the project like Py2Neo, it supports both the HTTP transport and the Bolt transport, the Bolt protocol. And okay, thank you, Peter, for the feedback. So yeah, let's continue that conversation for sure. And if we look at the driver supported transport, it's So versions is mostly relevant to Bolt. We could argue that maybe it might make sense in the future for HTTP as well. Who knows, maybe some APIs of Neo4j will only support HTTP2, for instance. Who knows? But for now, it's mostly meant for Bolt, and driver transport is quite simple. It's just a node wrapping HTTP or Bolt. And so Jean is asking me if I speak French, and the answer is oui, je parle français, but my streams are in English. So thank you for the question. But yeah, I'm not gonna. So I guess my accent betrayed me, right? So yeah, I'm French. I live in France near Paris, and but my streams are in English. Maybe one day French will conquer the world again, but French, the language, I mean, not in any other senses. But yeah, for now I'm just doing those in English. Maybe I will have some specific streams in French at some point. Who knows? And so yeah, I was saying here is my business key. So you can see, in contrast with Neo4j driver, which has a generated value, which tells. Thank you, Jean. About my accent, I know. So the Neo4j driver uses this generated value to tell Spring Data Neo4j, please, once you persist the node corresponding to an instance of Neo4j driver, assign it a UID, persist it in the graph, and populate that field. And because we want things to be mostly immutable, we use this wither. So basically, the framework will be able to detect this wither and pass it to UID. Only if needed, right? Because there is already an ID assigned and it's the same, we don't need to assign it again and create new instances. And so that's using generated value because the framework will manage it. However, in the case of driver transport type, it's only HTTP or Bolt. And so that's my key. There should only, and what that means as a corollary and something I learned last week during the last stream, Spring Data Neo4j will be smart enough to notice, okay, there is already a node in the graph with HTTP or Bolt, so I won't recreate one. So that's something that comes for free because, of course, it's the discrimination of entities happens on ID. And in that case, I'm not using generated value because I will make sure to populate those manually before I look. And so if we look at some testing, maybe now that we have a good sense of what the driver is, URI and list of transports, I'm using test containers. So that way I can use a Docker image without worrying about class path conflicts between Neo4j and my application. It's completely isolated, so it's great. Just using the data slice annotations just to say I'm only concerned, I just want Spring beans, so Spring classes available for dependency injection, but only related to data stuff, so repositories basically. Neo4j template and drivers, we'll see why in a minute. The container starts, and then I get a hold of the URL, username, and to automatically populate properties. That in turn will be used by Spring Data Neo4j 6 to connect to the right database instance, which is in that case the test container that has been started at the beginning of my test because of this test containers annotation on the class and the container on the field. And so Jean is asking me, so in French, about continuing to chat. Of course, the best way is either on Twitter or on the Slack or community.neo4j.com. So I can show that again. So I guess yeah, it would make more sense either on Slack. Yeah, probably on Slack. So if you're not there, I can send a link. Like there should be some kind of invite link somewhere publicly available. I can look that up and send it to you. And then yeah, let's continue the conversation afterwards. No problem. So yeah, so we have this link, and I will send it to you if you're not there already. So let me post this to YouTube because that's a question from YouTube. Actually, no, you know what? Let me post it in everywhere. All right, and coming back to my test container things and testing in general. So I have containers that starts at the beginning of every test. I instruct Spring Data Neo4j to connect through those configuration properties. And then after each test, I make sure I delete everything. Then, of course, my main thing here is about saving a driver. So I instantiate a transport. So I make sure it's in the database already. Actually, it doesn't have to, but that's a test I wanted to do. Then supported transport is basically the list of just that. So the bolt transport in version 4.2. And then my driver, which is a dummy driver here. I just, faked a URI, which is not official, of course, and supports, in that case, one transport, which is bolt at version 4.2. So when I call my repository.save, then I want to make sure the data ends up being in the database. So I don't want to use the repository for the same thing, because I don't want to use a class I'm testing to check that the behavior is correct, because you could suffer from double bugs, for instance, where the read and write would be buggy and it would cancel everything out, and then you would end up with a test that passed where although it shouldn't have. So yeah, I tend to try to use independent ways to prepare data and read data independent from what I'm using for the persistence, which is why the Neo4j template is quite nice. So the Neo4j template here, because it understands entities, entity classes, etc. You could go with the raw driver of the Neo4j client if you want to write Cypher queries directly. That also works completely valid. So because I use an empty database every time, when I save a driver, I should get a single driver at the end, which would be exactly the same as the one that I have here. And of course, the test passes. And the API is just, HTTP call on top of that. So when I post, I expect 201. So I could do actually a little more, but I'm mocking the repository. So that's probably enough. So I could test some edge cases, etc. But of course, for real production applications, it will be important for the sake of live stream and being concise enough. I'm not gonna dwell too much on these matters. And so yeah, so we have. I can even demo it. Let me first make sure I don't write to this database and switch to that one. And then let's just demo that the API works and start our front end finally. So I know it's a Spring Data Neo4j 6 series, but usually applications are not just backends. So that's why I will start working on the front end today. So if you're not interested in the front end part, you can see the demo and then you can leave the stream if that's not of interest for you. Otherwise, just if you're curious about starting an Angular project that talks to a Spring MVC actually API, you can of course stick around and more than we will continue. I will continue that for a bit. So I've got a very secure password, as you can see. I'm just changing the configuration here of my production application in the default configuration file for Spring Boot. And I just have to do that. And with that, by default, of course, it connects to a local host, so I don't have to change that. And if I run this with just Spring Boot command run, because I'm using Maven, it will start the application. And I should be able, maybe let's move that around here. I should be able to send some post requests, so I'm going to be a bit lazy. Yeah. So let me maybe just be very original. And so instead, this time I'm going to put an official driver with a nice URL of example.com driver 5 with supported transport. So bolt, yeah, bolt is okay. Oh yeah, except of course I zoomed in a little too much. With bolt v1, let's say bolt v4.2, and it's JSON, and then sending that. So sending a post request to localhost on the /driver endpoint. Post request because I'm using -- data with in curl implies post. And so if I do this, so first maybe just to make sure I'm not cheating, because I know you're all doubting me. Just kidding. But if we look real quick at the current database, which was the one I opened by accident when starting, so you can see there is an HTTP transport for two drivers, driver and driver 2. Driver 3 and driver 4 are using Bolt. And the support carries the version. So V1 and V1 in both cases. And if I say again that I have a new Bolt driver, but for version 4.2, we should see a new driver node and a new relationship to the Bolt transport node. Let's see that. Boom. All right, seems it works. Let's see. And indeed, we have a new node in the database. Support relationship carries a v4.2, so that's nice. And I have all the information. And you can see also the ID, which is the UUID managed by Spring Data Neo4j 6. So it generated a UUID for me, and that's a way to have technical IDs without much sweat, because the framework takes care of it. So cool. We have an API, and we're ready to go with the front end. So again, if you're not super interested in the front end part, and I know the title can be misleading, I know it's a Spring Data Neo4j 6 series, but we need a front end at some point. That's the whole point of this. I just don't want an API is nice, but a graphical user interface, it's even better. So let me start. Let me just start the front end. I'm going to be very original and call it web, for instance, or let's go old school with GUI. Then I believe I have a neat little trick here, because I don't want to do global installs. I'm using it. So Angular obviously is a JavaScript/TypeScript project, which relies on npm or yarn or some other tools if you fancy other JavaScript build tools. And when you go to their tutorials, they always say, oh yeah, just do this npm install -g, so do a global install that will be on a specific central location on your machine. But I don't like global installs because they can, that can mess up different projects. I'd rather have local installs for a specific project. So if a project is written with Angular 4, then I don't want to globally install Angular 4 because my other projects are maybe using Angular 6 or 7 or 8 or what have you. So that's why I really strive for installing everything locally per project. And with this nice trick, so npx is a way to delegate executions to dependencies. So in that case, I will tell it's a package, an external package that I have not installed yet. And yeah, I wonder if I'm gonna create, so let's say Neo4j driver admin. Let me zoom in a little more, by the way. And we'll start creating the Angular front end, yay. And so it tells me, oh, you need to install the following package. Okay, to proceed, yes. Hopefully that's not gonna be a global install. Otherwise that defeats the point, kinda. Then a few warnings that probably don't care about. So let me see. Of course, that's the joys of live streams, is that you get unexpected issues. So let me do it another way. Package name, Neo4j driver admin GUI maybe, version 0.0.1. Description will come back to that. Entry point will come back to that. Come back to that as well. That as well. That as well. License is already Apache 2. And yes, so at least now I have a standard node project. But now I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna say I want a local dev dependencies, because that's not something I need to run my application. I just needed to scaffold it. So that's Angular/CLI. Hopefully this method should work instead. So I is short for install, or maybe I will get the same error, in which, oh no, cool. All right. So here I have some node modules already, of course, and then I can redo my npx command, except I don't need the -p anymore because ng is part of my dependencies. So I believe it should work. It's part of the node module, so it should find this small utility. And let's be consistent. Ah, come on. All right, so that's not nice. Maybe. So I use NVM to manage different node environments. Let's see if I can if I can use npm, for instance. So that's for nodes. Is there anything for npm? Yeah, let's try this. Let's use the LTS version, so an older version maybe, and we'll see if that changes. So sorry about that. That's the joys of. Yeah, so I just want to install the long-term version. We get node 14. Wonder which version of npm is that. So thank you, Angular, for not supporting the latest stuff. That's very helpful. And it's npm 6. Okay, so that we should be good to go if I do this. So by the way, which means I should have done that, and the first method I tried would have worked anyway. So let's do npx again. And this time it should stop complaining. Do you want to enforce stricter type checking and stricter panel budget in the workspace? Well, sounds good to me. Would you like to add Angular routing? Probably. Then SCSS is probably fine. And okay, created an extra folder. My bad. So I'm going to move that. I'm going to move that in the same folder because I don't want to have a complex file tree. And let's Angular download everything, and then we'll move on. I will move the folder when it's done, and then I will start creating the components and services to interact with my API. I will probably start with service. So service in Angular is just an abstraction, a class, TypeScript class to interact with the external environment. So in my case, it would be the backend API. Cool. I mean, almost cool, except what? Except I'm gonna remove the node modules here. So sorry, it's a bit crud to do it like this, but and then move everything from here. And then I should remove this. Okay, cool. So just to be sure, if I do this, it should just work. So npm install, and then let me open an IDE and let's start coding for real. And of course, it's telling me about the update, but I'm using a long-term version, so I don't want to switch to 7 because Angular doesn't seem to work with it. So let me open my IDE on this particular project, or you know what, I already have IntelliJ, so let's see. It should work fine, but if not, I will move on. I will move on to WebStorm, which is more specialized towards web development, but I think IntelliJ Ultimate should be fine here. We'll see about that. So I've got all of this, of course, and as I was saying, I want to start with my service, and my service will basically interact with the API. So it should be rather simple. We'll see about that. So now that's okay. Intelligent still indexing, and in the meantime, I'm gonna generate a new file. So for that, I'm using ng, which is the Angular CLI, but I'm not doing any global install, so I need to do this instead. So I'm gonna generate a service, and in that case, that will be like a driver service. So it will suffix everything with a kind of class, kind of component it is, so whether it's a component, a service, or something else. and it should generate new files. Boom, see, it generates scaffolding for the tests and the service, so that's nice. And let us see. So I have this new, I have a lot of stuff actually, but we come back to that in a moment. First, I want to make sure I have my service to interact with the API. Yeah, okay, so I don't have all the plugins. So in that case, I'm gonna move over to WebStorm, which is another JetBrains product. More or less, you can see it as IntelliJ for web development. So let me open only this specific folder, and here we go. Let me find the project. Neo4j driver admin, the GUI folder. Yep, open, new window, and okay, here we are. So now I should have some syntax coloration or coloring, or I don't know even how to say it. So we have a nice service over there. We have a nice test over there, which doesn't do much, just tells that it's injected, because Angular, as you might know, also uses dependency injection. But, that's not really all I want. So because I like to do test-driven development, I will do that right now. So I'm just checking real quick that the font is big enough. Oh, but it's also starting a browser for the test, which is something I really don't like. I mean, a full-blown browser instead of using a headless thing. So let me check real quick how to change this. Yeah, so first, so that's using Karma, which is a test runner. So it's using Chrome by default, I believe, but I rather have Chrome headless, so I don't have a new Chrome window popping up every time I run tests. So that's probably the first thing, and I would probably do the same thing with end-to-end tests. Also, it's not as important, but let's do it right now so I don't forget about it later. And basically, I just need to add a couple of options when I start Chrome, which are those. Boom, headless. And usually you have more settings to add, but so the end-to-end tests are managed by Protractor, and which are more or less like Selenium, if you know this kind of end-to-end testing framework, where you can interact with DOM elements, etc., clicks, and more. And Karma is more towards unit tests for your components, services, etc. So cool. We have the scaffolding, but we just don't want to test that the service can be injected. We want to make sure that the service interacts with our nice little API. And so for that, I will be honest with you. I've done. So why am I choosing Angular first? Maybe I should have started with that. It just happens that I'm more comfortable with it, which is the only reason. I have a well set up TDD flow with Angular, and I'm not super familiar with the other frameworks, so it's probably not as hipster as it could be, but I'm just doing the things I know better, especially for live streaming, and that's why. So yeah, I've been doing a lot in 2-3 years ago, a little less these days, but still doing it from time to time. So what do I need? I will need to configure the testing modules, because I'm gonna interact with an API over HTTP. So I'm gonna need basically this. And that's part of the testing module from Angular, as you can see. And then I will have some ways to make sure that request as response and responses are in a certain way. So that's something I'm gonna need here, which is the HTTP testing controller, using HTTP mock or stub or whatever you want. And then I can get a hold of this. So once the test bed, which is basically the application context of Spring, if you're more familiar with Spring, I can say, hey, please give me the instance of HTTP testing controller, because it's part of the module. If you look, there should be somewhere at some point, yeah, you see this HTTP testing controller is exported as well as part of this module, which is why we can retrieve it through standard injection. And then after I have this, I need to make sure that all the interactions I expect actually happened. And a good succinct way to do that is just to say, hey, verify every interaction after each test. So if something, if you expected a specific request and it didn't happen, then it would fail. All right, so that's the setup. But then, of course, we want to make sure that we can save a driver. So in that case, we'll have some methods, something like, so my service is driver service, it's just there. So actually, let me move things around. Okay, so we can see both the implementation and the test. So for now, the implementation doesn't not do much. And what I want to do, it should send post request to the driver API, something like this. And so I don't really care about this. And then what do I want to do? I want to do probably service.save and service.save of something, which would be a Neo4j driver, which does not exist yet, right? I first write what I want before actually defining it. I like to express my intentions first. That helps me reasoning through the problem and make sure I fully understand what I want to do before actually implementing anything. So that's why I'm no. Yeah, there will be quite some red code for a while before I finish. And let's see. So it should, and then I can start describing the kind of interaction I want. And so let me do the basics, and then we can refine it. So I'm cheating a little bit, as I told you. I have an application I worked on recently, which has some similar things. I believe it's only driver here and post. So let's start with that. Maybe not as complete as one would like, but at least it's a good excuse to get the implementation started. I could check the body, for instance, but yeah, let's see. I'm just checking real quick. Yeah, we can expect we can add some more. So let's try to solve first this Neo4j driver, which does not exist yet. Can actually do this. I don't need the prefix, contrary to my backend, because there is no driver in the dependencies, so that's not going to clash with anything. So yes, I could of course put it in the test class, but I'd rather put it in its own file, which would be driver.ts. And so, nope, I really don't like this. I will add it to Git when I want to add it. Thank you very much. And the way to do it, where I like to do it, is to declare it as an interface, and that way I can just, get some JSON, stick it to the interface, and let the TypeScript magic happen, and it will automatically coerce the JSON into this. And what's the driver? So if we don't remember, it was a URI. The ID we don't really care about. It's whether it's official or not. That's a Boolean. And then the supported transports. Maybe I will rename those to match better the API, but we'll see about that. And that's driver transport. Then, of course, I also, yeah, clarify if you want to. Oh, sorry, too much Golang, my bad. Yeah. And then let's create an interface. Actually, just to not to waste too much time, I'm just going to cheat and I'm going to look at this real quick. So that's the payload I sent. I have to send. Oops, not nice. So maybe let's do something even better. So in IntelliJ, you have what's called a scratch file. So if you have anything temporary, except I cannot find the shortcut for some reason, I'm just going to do it the lame way. Scratch, come on, I want a scratch file. Yes, thank you. Just a temporary file you can keep around for some time. And then in that case, I can just format it. Okay, much better. So I'm going to move that as well here, just to help us with the naming. And yeah, I closed everything. Nice. Not really what I wanted to do, but it's okay. So I've got the structure. I need supported transport, whether it's official or not, the URI, and supported transport is just a transport. Yeah, so that's not super nice, but so it's just a transport. And whoa, for some reason it compiled, really? Oh, oops. So driver, yeah, I'm probably gonna cheat and do a little bit like I did before and have driver transport just to avoid the naming clash. And driver transport is just transport with a value. And a version, of course, versions, supported versions. In that case, I'm going to be a bit sloppy. I'm just going to say those are strings. And here I can actually, I believe, no, let's keep going with the interface. What do I have? I have a value, and the value could be a enum enumeration. So let me try that. So my value is yeah, okay. The naming starts to to be a bit challenging, to be honest. Supported transport, driver transport, and driver transport something. I'm not even sure, so let's go with this for now. I know it's lame, but oops, interface. I keep mistake. So enum is a thing. Yay! Not even sure how we write it, but so HTTP alt. Yeah. Oops. No. Okay. This should work. Perfect. So I've got all my boilerplate for my domain. It should match exactly the JSON, so I don't have to, think too much about it. I can cast it directly. Supported transport as a value, and versions, which are just array of strings. All right, cool. And so if I go back to my test, what do I want to do? I want to save a driver. So I will need, so that's actually, it's gonna look a little bit different. It's not a class, it's an interface. So the way we're gonna do it is a bit different. So one way you can do it is actually write simple things like this. So let's do this. And have this cast, and that should work. If there is any mismatch between the property names and the actual fields of the interface, then it will just not compile. So that's quite a nice check as well. So in that case, what do we want? I'm just going to cheat. I'm just going to take all of that and remove the quotes. Fix current file. Thank you very much. And why is it unhappy? I'm not sure. Conversion of type URI string official true. Interesting. Let me have a look. Supported transports are incompatible. So Jean is asking about sending messages on Slack. You can actually send me a message on Slack. It should work. There is a DM, direct messages, and you should just find my name there, and you will be able to send a message. So hopefully that helps. Supported transport are incompatible. Transport value string, version strings is not too interesting. So it's telling me that this is not compatible to an array of driver supported transports. Let's try to see why. So I believe it's telling me that a transport, which is a value, because I can't use the enum, really? That's a pity. I like type safety. Let me Google this real quick. Treat enum as string. Oh, okay. you know, just I'm not gonna read even more. So yeah, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this. Will it work? Nope, not really. No, have string enums. Yeah, I'm not even sure maybe I'm not using the right version though. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna get rid of this and I'm gonna just write string for now. It's not as type safe as I would like, but I will figure it out at some point. So okay, just to try to help Jean a little bit. So I'm gonna show you Slack. So I'm using the desktop app, but it should be the same as the website. You have a list of channels, and then you have a list of direct message. If you click on plus and you look for Florent, you will see me, and then you will be able to send me a message. That's as simple as that. So you have direct messages, you have channels first, direct messages, click on plus, search for Florent, and you will see me there. So if you want to reach out to me, that's the way to go. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, so does it still complain? Nope. Yeah, the problem was this somehow there is no, I'm not sure what version of TypeScript we're using, so let me check real quick. Should be in there somewhere. TypeScript 4.1.2. Too bad, not 4.2, which is why I can't use this nice string enum thing. Okay, and finally, let's save driver. Of course, it does not compile because there is no save. Save the driver, and I need to import it. And then at some point, I need, of course, to make the test pass. Suppress type def for current line. Not sure what it is about. Maybe. Okay, just formatting stuff. And of course, he wants me to be super accurate about the type return signature. That's a lint, by the way. That's built in with Angular. So there is the TypeScript lint, which has some syntax and cosmetics rule about how you should write code. And then I have my failing test. I mean, hopefully it's going to fail. And this time it does not. Oh, did it complain about this? Let's go to the terminal. So run npm test, which is a goal configure to run ng tests. Hopefully I should see a test failure because of course the implementation is not ready. Yeah. So you can see that the test I just added does not pass yet. Why? It's expecting a matching request for /driver, but didn't see any. That's completely expected. So yeah, let's try slowly. I'm not gonna guarantee I'm gonna have the full implementation ready by the hour, but let's try. So just let's have a look at how to do this. Yeah. So the way you do it with Angular, so you can use what's called the HTTP client, which is a standard HTTP client built in Angular, I believe. So you've got this nice little classic from Angular, and because I'm prefixing it with private, that will automatically be bound to a field of the class driver service. So far, so good. And then all I need to do is this HTTP post. And then probably, so let me just make sure. Yes, please. Post then to where? So I'm gonna post to /driver. So I'm gonna assume they live on the same domain. Usually cloud providers can help you with that. That's a nice assumption. And there is a nice trick actually. If you run on different ports that I'm gonna show you, if not today, next week, to make Angular believe that it runs on the same port as my backend. Because as you know, by default, Spring Boot runs on 8080 and Angular on 4200, 4200. So of course it wouldn't work here if I just do /driver, but there is a way to configure Angular in development mode to proxy basically this. I'm gonna show you that soon. Maybe not today though, but we'll see. Then I need a request body, which in that case should just be my driver. And in the option, I can be a little bit specific, which would be like at least headers. And I don't remember how it works. headers. How does it look like? So let's import it just to see. Private headers. Okay, it's just basically a simple array. So, all right, just that. Or actually that, I think. So I will just do at least content type, just to I mean, it's probably the default, but it's explicit. And same thing for the return. I will probably do accept for the response. Not sure why it's unhappy about this. Unnecessary quoted accept found. Okay. So don't quote it. And that should return me an observable, I believe. Yeah, observable of whatever, observable of any. So maybe I can be a bit smarter about this, and I will return an observable of Boolean, whether the save has failed or not. Of course, here it's unhappy because I have not returned anything, but let's go back to the test then, and then I will subscribe. And subscribe on what? On save succeeded. Oops, too many C's. Boolean. And I expect that save succeeded is to be truthy, because we're in the JavaScript world here. There is no truth. Oh, there is to be true. Okay, so let's go with to be true. And then I will have to end the test when the assertion is done. So here, with a nice Jasmine utility that tells an asynchronous test like this one to stop whenever I tell it to stop. Cool. And so then, of course, I need to do this, and then so you can type some transformations on your observable, because by default, I guess I get just a raw response, and I want to map whatever I have, which I'm not sure about, observable of what? Of object. Of the response, with the response body as JSON. Nice, but that doesn't tell me much. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to Google this as well. So response, and I want response status, I'm gonna guess, or status code. Angular response status. And quick tip, when you're searching for Angular stuff, make sure it's recent enough, because sometimes you get old stuff that's not super interesting. And so if I look real quick, pipe, retry, capture, whoa, that's super complicated here. Error status. Yeah, no, I'm not interested about this. Status. Or what? Really? Nope. I'm not interested in error cases. I just want... this is success, yeah, but what kind of success? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and assume it's status, and if not, we'll see. So I'm gonna cheat here. I'm gonna put any, and I'm gonna make sure it's actually 201, because that's what my API returns. And I have full control over the API, so I can be super specific like this. And hopefully that should work, or maybe not. And if that doesn't work, you know what? That's okay, because that will give me something to start with next week. Let's see. I probably missed a few things. If that works the first time, it would be too nice to be true. Oh, and for some reason it's super slow. Yeah, so it's failing. It's not completing the test as it should. So the done is never called. Interesting. Interesting. So let me just... let's try to fix this. I'm giving myself 5 more minutes. And if not, I will continue troubleshooting this next week. So type error sockets or what? Nice. Very nice. I cannot debug for some reason. That's annoying. Yeah, okay, so the demo codes, live stream codes are against me today, so I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna troubleshoot that next week. Failing test is always a good reminder of what we want to do. Sorry, I don't know why I moved my Restream Studio. Let's stop the screen sharing. And if I can. So thanks for joining today. I know most of the content today was about Angular, which is not something you expect from a Spring Data 6, Spring Data Neo4j 6 series. However, as I was telling, it wouldn't be a full application if you didn't have a front end, at least in my case. So yeah, hopefully by next week we'll fix that rebel test and complete the service and the component and have a first graphical user interface, probably with a very bad design, and that would complete the first iteration of the application. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, please stay safe. Stay home as much as you can, and let's keep in touch. So everyone, of course, and especially Peter and Jean, if you have things you want to chat about, reach out to me on Twitter or on Slack. Thank you. I will end the stream there, and see you soon. Bye-bye.